On June 4th, 1960, 4 teenagers went camping beside Finland's Lake Bodom. They expected an ordinary summer night. Instead, before sunrise, 3 of them would be dead. Only 18-year-old Niels Gustafsson survived, badly injured and unable to remember what happened. The tent had been attacked from outside, but the killer was gone. No weapon was found. No one could explain why 3 teenagers were murdered while 1 survived, and the darkest question had just begun. Who was hiding in the darkness that night? At dawn, the quiet lake became a crime scene. 3 teenagers were found dead inside and around the tent, while Niels Gustafsson lay seriously injured. Police searched the forest and shoreline for the attacker and the missing murder weapon, but found no clear answer. Witnesses reported seeing suspicious people near the lake that morning, yet none could be connected to the crime. The killer had vanished, leaving investigators with only fragments of a terrifying puzzle. Niels Gustafsson was alive, but the most important hours of that night were missing from his memory. He had suffered serious injuries, yet he could not clearly explain who attacked the group or what happened inside the tent. Police questioned him, searched the area, and investigated several possible suspects. One strange detail was the discovery of Gustafsson's shoes away from the campsite. Decades later, DNA testing found blood from one of the murdered girls on the shoes, making them an important part of the renewed investigation. For more than 40 years, Gustafsson remained a survivor. Then everything changed. In 2004, police arrested him. The man who had once been treated as a victim was suddenly accused of murdering his 3 friends. But could investigators really prove it after 44 years? For decades, the Lake Bodom murders remained unsolved. Then, in 2004, investigators reopened the case with modern forensic methods. Their attention turned back to Niels Gustafsson, the only survivor. Police believed new evidence, including blood found on Gustafsson's shoes, could support a completely different explanation of the attack. They arrested him and accused him of killing Mila, Anja, and Seppo before injuring himself to make the crime look like an outside attack. But there was a serious problem. More than 40 years had passed. The murder weapon was still missing, there was no reliable eyewitness identifying Gustafsson, and much of the original evidence was uncertain. Then another disturbing name entered the story: Hans Asp. Some investigators and writers believed his behavior after the murders was suspicious. He had appeared at a Helsinki hospital shortly after the killings, and his strange behavior later fueled speculation that he might have been connected to Lake Bodom. But suspicion was not proof. Asman was never charged with the murders. Now, everything depended on the courtroom. Would the old evidence finally reveal the truth, or would Lake Bodom remain a mystery forever? In 2005, after more than 4 decades, the Lake Bodom case, prosecutors argued that Niels Gustafsson had killed his 3 friends and then injured himself to make investigators believe an unknown attacker had entered the campsite. The prosecution pointed to the blood found on Gustafsson's shoes and other evidence they believed supported their theory. But the defense argued that the evidence was too uncertain, especially after 45 years. There was still no murder weapon. No eyewitness could identify Gustafsson as the attacker, and investigators could not prove exactly what happened during the missing hours before sunrise. On October 7th, 2005, the court delivered its decision. Niels Gustafsson was acquitted. The evidence was not enough to prove that he had committed the murders, but his acquittal created an even darker question. If Gustafsson was not the killer, then who attacked the 4 teenagers? The courtroom had cleared the only survivor, but it had not solved the original crime. And somewhere in the darkness of Lake Bodom's history, the real killer was still unidentified. Gustafsson's acquittal left investigators with the same unanswered question: who had attacked the teenagers at Lake Bodom? Over the years, several other suspects became part of the investigation. One of the most discussed was Hans Assmann, a German-born man whose name became connected to the case because of his unusual behavior after the murders. Professor Jorma Palo later believed Assmann could have been involved, but no evidence ever proved it. Another name was Carl Valdemar Gillström, a local kiosk owner who lived near Lake Bodom. Stories about his behavior and alleged statements created suspicion around him as well. But again, suspicion was never enough to establish guilt. The investigation had produced theories, suspects, and rumors, but none could answer the most important questions. The murder weapon was never found. No killer was conclusively identified, and the events of those early morning hours remained uncertain. What makes the case so disturbing is that the killer did not leave behind an obvious trail. Whoever attacked the teenagers disappeared, while the evidence slowly faded with time. Decades later, investigators had tried modern forensic methods, questioned suspects, and taken the case back to court. Still, the lake remained silent, and the final truth was nowhere to be found. More than 60 years have passed since that summer night in 1960. Lake Bodom is still there, surrounded by trees and quiet water, but the mystery that began on its shore has never truly disappeared. 3 teenagers, Mila Björklund, Anja Mäki, and Seppo Boisman, lost their lives. Niels Gustafsson survived the attack, but for decades he carried the memory of a night he could not completely remember. He was eventually arrested and accused of the murders, but in 2005, the court acquitted him, ruling that the evidence was not strong enough to prove his guilt. Other suspects were investigated. Hans Assmann became the subject of 8 theories. Carl Gillström was also discussed, but neither was ever proven to be the killer. The murder weapon was never conclusively found. No suspect was convicted. No final explanation has closed the case. And that is what makes Lake Bodom so haunting. It was not a legend. It was not a ghost story. 4 teenagers really went camping beside that lake. Before sunrise, 3 were dead, 1 was badly injured, and whoever attacked them disappeared. Today, the lake remains peaceful. But beneath that peaceful surface lies a question that has survived for generations. Who entered that campsite before dawn, and why did they leave 3 young lives behind? Perhaps the answer disappeared with the killer, or perhaps, somewhere in the forgotten evidence, the truth is still waiting to be discovered. Lake Bodom remains one of Finland's most disturbing unsolved mysteries,